with that, kind of with the logistics there, we're going to stay on the slide just for a minute longer while I introduce Dwight. My name is Kim Johnson. I am the Director of Marketing here at Igor. I'm the face behind that email and that name. Of course, I would be derelict in my duties if I didn't encourage everyone to make sure that they're following us on our social media platforms. Our YouTube channel is where we'll post this once we, maybe edit out the beginning and some of that. So look for that on YouTube in the future and we'll let you all know. So today, Dwight is going to talk about common myths of PoE. He is Igor's CTO and founder, and he really has more than 20 years of tech entrepreneurship experience. He's currently serving on a company Cisco's labeled as a disruptor with Igor. And prior to that, he founded and sold another energy technology company, QAS, which was a leader in building analytics. So that's really informed a lot of the vision here at Igor. And, we're not going to, of course, we'll integrate Igor throughout this, but we're really focusing on the basics of PoE and trying to give you and everyone out there a sense of trying to dispel rumors that have maybe persisted a little longer than we'd like. And so since you're not here to hear me talk, you're here to hear Dwight, I think I'm just going to hand it over to him. And Dwight, why don't you kick it off? Share some of the myths.
Awesome. Thank you, Kim. Appreciate it. And I see this picture of me and I think how far we've come, maybe not in a good way, but, I haven't gotten a haircut in ages and can't think of the last time I wore a suit. So a lot's changed. So Igor, we are enabling smart buildings and we have an Internet of Things platform that helps make that happen. And lighting being one of those key applications that's on top of that. And we get a lot of questions, a lot of misconceptions. And so this really is to help, what are some of those that we hear frequently and talk about what's fact from fiction. And you're going to see a pretty clear pattern in these answers. So it will start to be pretty obvious. But let's start off with the first one. PoE lighting, is it proprietary? And the answer is fiction, so long as you're actually using a standard. So the IT standard power over Ethernet switch, it would be something that you could get, let's say for Cisco or from others, that is that IEEE standard, the BT standard being the latest and greatest. But if you can put in voice over IP phones, IP cameras, Wi-Fi hotspots, if you can plug those kind of devices into this switch, then it's an IT standard power over Ethernet switch. If, however, you are being, someone's coming to you and talking about how their device plugs into something that looks like this, but only their device can plug into it and nothing else, then that's probably, your hint as to it's proprietary. It's not using an IT standard. It's just using Ethernet for transporting power and data, but it's not using an interoperable IP standard. So that's really, really important to understand. It's much easier to create something that is proprietary than it is to make something that is standards based. So, if it is, going back to that really quick, if it is using IT standards, you get all the benefits of, now it can be supported by the IT industry. It can use IT and IP cybersecurity standards, and it can be managed within the network. There's just a tremendous number of benefits that you get. I mean, IP networks are used at any scale, at any application, simultaneously supporting numerous applications at once, large bandwidth, low latency. There's just so many other benefits. And you'd have to really assess, if it's a proprietary offering, assess all of those things yourself rather than just know it, because you get all those answers just by the fact of using an IP network. So it requires proprietary lights, sensors, and controls. The answer being fiction. No, it does not have to use proprietary lights, sensors, and controls, but it really does depend on the offering. So for Igor in particular, we have a node which allows you to connect just about any non-IP device up to the node. And you can connect, it could be relays, it can be light fixtures up to 4, on this particular node, 4 channels worth of light fixtures. You can have wall controls, you can have analog inputs, serial bus, USB, just about anything you can imagine can be powered and communicate with this node. And that allows for you really being able to choose whatever the best breed product and hardware that you want, whether it's a sensor or actuator, to connect up to the system. And it allows you to quickly and easily create, whatever it is that you want to deploy, whether it's a lighting system or, a great story we just had. We connected up an HVAC relay system and a wall control that's a touchscreen. And within just a couple of weeks, we have the ability to now communicate and basically control HVAC units. So it's this is such an interoperable and powerful device that allows for innovating quickly other applications beyond lighting and within lighting. And just to further that point, here are some other devices that come from a variety of different companies, and you can see them all listed on the left side. And this is just a sampling of companies that we've just posted on our website, but there's many others that have also either integrated with us or we've done field integrations of product that comes from a wide variety of sources, wide variety of product families, lights, wall controls, motors, you name it. It's probably something that we've integrated too. So it's very, very versatile. But there's other companies out there that are primarily hardware companies, and really they are packaging up their existing hardware with power over Ethernet so that they can sell their hardware. And in that case, they're obviously going to be promoting a solution that may be only working with their hardware, might work a little bit with others just to be able to say that so that it looks good. But for us anyway, it's we're a data software company primarily. We really have no end devices that we're trying to promote, and specifically, we just are trying to enable customers to use whatever they want to use and do it easily and quickly. Another question is, must home run all fixtures? So having a power over Ethernet home run or Ethernet cable going all the way from the network switch all the way to an end device, and then it only can be connected to that one end device. And that's fiction. And this also depends on the offering. But for Igor, you can take that power over Ethernet port you get from the switch, and you connect up a node that can be, let's say, embedded into a light fixture. And then you can daisy chain to yet another light that also has a node integrated inside of it. And then to a sensor that would have some, that the connectors embedded into it as well. And just do one device to the next. And that way, let's say you have a power over Ethernet port that's delivering 60 watts worth of power. You can, if that first light's using 20 watts, you still have plenty of energy you can forward on to the next light and to the sensors. So you can minimize the number of home runs, you can minimize the number of network switches, and really save a lot of money. Another question is, does a node need to be integrated to each device? And once again, it's fiction. So if you haven't figured out the pattern yet, it's pretty self-evident. A lot of fiction out there, which is, we're addressing myths. So Igor nodes, and for us, we can have these nodes remote. They're plenum rated. They have the ease of use of doing field commissioning and field configuration, all via software and firmware, via the network. So you could be walking around with an iPad and actually configure the nodes to, and actually we have a library of SKUs for devices that we've already profiled. And so we understand exactly how every, we have a library of hundreds of these sensors and actuators and lights that you just choose which device you want to connect to, and it automatically configures the node with the appropriate parameters so that the node can talk to that device. And so it really doesn't require a lot of thought on the configurator's part. You don't have to think.
Dwight,
Yes.
We got a clarifying question I am going to pop in.
Yes.
save a lot for the end, but there's been a couple on the node already. Does the node have a minimum load? That was asked by Sabra White. And then Daniel Weiser's asking, can the node receive both digital and analog input from sensors?
Yeah,
So
great questions.
let me expand a little bit on what the node can do.
Yeah, sorry, I've got two screens, and so I didn't see the questions writing in here. So yeah, feel free, Kim.
That's why I'm here, Dwight. You focus on the presentation.
Appreciate that. Yeah, so the nodes can take both digital and analog inputs. Digital, it can take either pull up or pull down, to pulling up to from ground, or up from ground or down to ground. So it can take both of those, and also serial bus communication, USB communication. USB actually allows for easily hooking up different kinds of devices that can transceive to just about any kind of protocol you can imagine. So it could be DALI, DMX, wireless, nearby wireless devices. So it's very, very versatile in that way. The minimum load, if the node has all of the things that are attached to it turned off, then it has a minimum load of, just on idle, that's a little around 1 watt, a little bit less than 1 watt. The new BT standard that is out with Power over Ethernet allows for that to actually be lower and still be running properly. So that's kind of an exciting thing with the new BT standard. So moving on here, separate node is a separate node required for each device. So a 1-to-1 ratio of node per device. And that is also fiction. So on this particular example, we can see from a PoE port, it's going to a node, and it could be daisy chained to yet more nodes. But on this one node, we can see how a number of devices are connected. And this really illustrates how flexible the solution can be, and you get diminishing costs. If you share that one node with multiple devices, then the cost of that node is obviously spread across all those devices, number one. But also imagine having in your ceiling a node that's near a device, and now it also has a USB connector. So therefore, after the install, you're left with a building that has USB connectors and serial bus connectors and all these other connectors that are now open and available for you to continue to expand your building over time. Whereas before, it would have been a real painful experience to have if you ever wanted to expand your install and do more with it. And the other thing that we do from a cybersecurity standpoint is we can disable those ports if they are not being used, and we can do other identifiers to make sure the right devices are connected to them. We do some really interesting things with cybersecurity to lock down and protect, know if something's happening that shouldn't be. So that's having this whole various different configurations of the nodes really helps, because it's what we found is a lot of designers are drawn to one versus another, and a lot of times they'll have hybrids of different approaches within the same building. So when it comes to a light, like a linear light, they may want it embedded in the fixture. When it comes to really small decorative or pendant lights, they may want one node that's powering multiple lights, and then being able to deploy sensors wherever you want easily. Let's see. What are the benefits of embedding the node in the device versus external? And really, it's a design preference. One of the benefits is it could be aesthetics. So now you have a place for the node if it's inside the fixture, whereas if it's outside, you have to find a place to put it. You have to, depending on the jurisdiction and the authority having jurisdiction for that geography, it could be that they force you to have it in a junction box and so forth. So it could be maybe the install could be a little more complicated if you have to find a home for it outside the fixture. If it's inside the fixture, or rather one of our models is that we will send the node to a lighting manufacturer, and that lighting manufacturer will install it at their assembly line. So at the end of the assembly line, it's an Igor enabled device so that when it arrives at the job site, it's ready to go. And so that's really helpful. A lot of times when that's done, the node is inside the fixture. But if it's a really small fixture, the node may be mounted on the outside of the fixture, or it may be packaged in a box with the fixture, but with wiring, so it could be wired remotely. So it really has to do with aesthetics and how you want to, if you want to spread the cost of a node out amongst multiple devices that are connecting to it. So a lot of individual decisions there as to your preference. Another question is that I'm seeing on the list here is, is the node constant current or constant voltage or both? And the node that I was showing is constant current, but we also have a constant voltage node that will be coming out here in the next about 3 to 6 months. So that will be something that's definitely we'll be talking about. Do you plan to launch a full, let's see here, do you plan to launch a full RJ45 node to connect to PoE enabled fixtures? And yeah, that's basically what we have. So I'm not totally understanding that question, but Kim, you might be able to dive further into that one and ask a clarifying question on that. All right, just for me to continue on to the slide deck here. So PoE lighting, is it complex? And that's fiction, and once again, it depends on the offering. But this kind of just gives you an idea as to, if you look at just lighting, and this offering can be used for security systems, access control, for asset tracking, all sorts of things. But when it comes to just lighting, look at the difference. It's just kind of night and day as to the complexity. When you see cables, that they're simplified. You don't have all kinds of different kinds of cables, and you're unifying both power and data onto one cable. And even if you compare that to wireless, you still have, with the wireless, you have to think about the wireless connectivity separately, and that has its own level of complexities. This just further simplifies things. And what I found is keeping things simple means that you're creating a solid foundation that you can build upon. And we really see this as a solution platform that you can continue to build upon in so many different ways. So just keeping things simple is of huge value. And it reduces complexity that usually will reduce cost. So it's really, you can see the elegance of the solution. Yeah, PoE lighting is limited to 60 watts. False. So if we look at the evolution of power over Ethernet in general, it started as being able to deliver 15 watts of power over Ethernet. Then it's moved on to 30 watts, and somewhat more recently is 60 watts, and then very recently, really just over last year, then we saw that movement to 90 watts, and it became a standard that Igor was the first to have a 90 watt node, and we actually have the first 2 Cisco 90 watt installs in the world. And those installs were actually the first use of their 90 watt switch ever for any application. So those are, big feathers in our cap, but very excited that Power over Ethernet is now delivering that type of wattage, because if you have a couple fixtures that are, let's say, 35 watt, then you could pair those up with a couple other sensors and some other things, and now you can have a lot more on one home run than you otherwise could. So no rebates with Power over Ethernet. False. So we were actually the first solution to be DLC qualified as well, and DLC qualified is Design Light Consortium, that once you have this mark on your solution, that allows for utilities to get prescriptive rebates, that they just say, as long as it's a DLC certified solution, we'll provide you a rebate. And the utilities have to be subscribing to this. They have to have a rebate program and have this as part of it, but most do. And so DLC is the widely recognized mechanism for creating rebate programs for utilities, and we do satisfy them. Once again, this is very much dependent on who is offering a PoE solution, so it does depend. Is PoE lighting more expensive than traditional? No, it is not. And that's changed over time, I will say. So since our company was formed in 2013, over the years, we've definitely seen a huge improvement in the economics. So, and a number of levers have really contributed to that. So one of them is the amount of power that you get per port. By having 60 watt to now 90 watt, that means you have less network switches, you have less home runs, and those two things, and the less labor to install both things, really improves the economics. And then decreasing power required per end device. So for instance, for a light fixture that used to be 30 watts back in 2013, that same light fixture now is more efficient because you're able to deliver more lumens per watt. And so now that light fixture is 20 watts. So you can have more light fixtures on a home run, and you can have more power on a home run. So whereas you can only have 2 of those light fixtures on the 60 watt a couple of years ago, now you can have 4 and some extra on the 90 watt. So it's just radically different. And you can see how the economics continue to just get better. And then, you get those effects of less network switches, home runs, and install labor. Power over Ethernet isn't UL 924 certified. In other words, you can't satisfy emergency lighting. That is fiction. We can satisfy emergency lighting. And this is, once again, dependent on your vendor, but we do have a UL 924 certified node, which we even have a patent around the capabilities of this. But it's really pretty special in that this node has actually been certified by our lighting companies that have OEM'd it, and it lasts up to 35 years and through life cycle testing, and also by LEDs lasting very long, and that's also means LED fixtures in general are going to last longer. But typically, emergency battery packs are put inside the light fixture. Well, with this approach, you can have a UPS powering your power over Ethernet switches, which can then power these nodes and keep your lights up and running in an emergency. And these nodes, by having this rating, make that possible. So certain geographies still have some restrictions. Primarily, it's New York and Chicago still have restrictions on using emergency power over Ethernet. We're working with those jurisdictions to get wider adoption, but that's coming. And in the rest of the country, we're seeing this is something that has been accepted. So it's definitely continues to round out the full solution and how you can use this one platform for so many different applications. And is power over Ethernet limited to lighting? And talk about, it can be for so many different applications. I've already talked about that, so there's no surprise. That's fiction. Once again, based on the vendor, but for us, one of that story about how we were able to quickly create a virtual thermostat, basically, by connecting up to an HVAC system and wall control, we can do the same thing for others. So a nurse call station, we're able to connect up bed sensors and pull cords and other things to our node and create a whole nurse call station just by taking existing parts and pieces. It's pretty phenomenal. One of the other applications was door locks. So if you look at power over Ethernet door locks, a lot of times they will cost around $1,500. That's a lot of money. So if you could take a door lock instead, that is just a strike plate that's electrified, that costs something like $15. So it's just dramatically different, right? If you take a nearby node that's already powering a light and you connect it to one of those strike plates that's $15, you just transform that $15 strike plate to be a power over Ethernet device. And it bubbles all the way up to our APIs and our platform, where you can build applications to do, interesting things with access control now. Versus if you have a power over Ethernet door lock, you have to have a home run to every single one of those. You have all the install labor for that home run, the cost of the switches, the cost of the home runs, the cost of the $1,500 device. So with our approach, you're able to use this one unified infrastructure, this one platform that can unify all these different applications for such a small incremental cost that it's really mind-boggling. I mean, you're going to save, in that one example, you're saving over 100 times the money. So it's just really exciting technology as to the applications and implications. So moral of the story is the PoE offerings are not all created equal. A lot of times we'll hear that, oh, it's a power over Ethernet, such and such, and it's thrown around and like everything's created equal, and it really isn't. You have to go into these level of details to know and to understand how the details matter, whether you're going to be enabled with a solution that's future-proof and enabling you to really go beyond what you may think, how you want to use it today is one thing, how you end up using it tomorrow and what you wish you would have had when you are 2 years from now. Those are important questions that, really can mean a lot to how you're able to position yourself in the future. So Kim, do you want to moderate the questions here? I think there's quite a few. Actually.
Absolutely. We're getting some great questions. Some are just simple clarifications. So maybe we'll start with a couple of those. We have some questions about the switches. So does it matter, from Rob Reynolds, does it matter which PoE switch you use? Do you have to use Cisco? And Dave asked, is Cisco the only brand able to supply 90-watt network switches, or are there others on the market now?
Yeah, great question. So as long as it's that standard, that BT standard, then we can connect to it. And actually, it doesn't even have to be the BT standard. As long as it's the AT standard as well. Let's see if I can get to that slide here so that you can have that right in front of you. But those standards we are compatible with. So it's really no problem whatsoever. It doesn't have to be Cisco. Cisco is our good friend. We do a lot with them. But as long as it's that AT or BT standard, then we're going to be able to work with it. We like to vet these switches because sometimes there's slight nuances with these switches, but there are a variety of 90-watt options now that we have shown that we're compatible with, I think, all of them. So, if you're interested in learning more, I would just, please contact us and follow up and we can get you more information.
All right. Ruhan's asking, when you referenced your emergency lighting, we didn't maybe clarify how Igor does it. So how would we provide emergency lighting? Are there batteries on each individual fixture, or by providing an inverter to network switch?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it could be either one, as long as the network switch is getting a UL 924 certified power input into that switch, then it's good to go. So that could be from an inverter that's local. It could be from a generator. It could be from a UPS battery pack, but whatever it's from has to be rated UL 924, which the rating of that just basically means that for 90 minutes, it's going to be able to support that load that would be used in an emergency condition. So that rating could be field rated. So if you plan the projects properly, you could use non-UL 924 components and then field rate it to say it indeed does perform 90 minutes worth of proper load for that time to get that rating. But I would reach out to your engineering community for your project, and we also have connections at UL that we can help connect you with to further explain this. It's a really important point to get right in the design of your project. So I don't want to make it sound too easy, or you really need to have the proper person to plan out the project so that there are surprises. But if you do it in the proper process, you're going to come out well.
Okay, a few more clarification, then I might switch it up and pick a couple that are a little bit more, a little longer answers. So do you want to just, this is about the node. Is the node plenum rated? That's from Andrew. And then Maurice asked, is RS-232 integration supported by the nodes?
Mm-hmm. Yep, so the node is plenum rated, so that's no problem. The RS-232, the way that we handle that is we have a converter. Our node is RS-45 output, and so we just connect on an inverter, like a little dongle that converts to 232. So that's how we communicate in that situation.
All right, we have one from Eric here. So the best part of PoE, he says, is that you have the ability to deliver 24 volts. Has a partner created a fixture with a directly driven LED module, essentially removing the driver?
Directly connected module. I don't know how you would necessarily, with power over Ethernet, what you get is data, and you have power that's 50 volts effectively. Each power over Ethernet switch is slightly different. Anywhere from 50 to 60 volts. But, to power a fixture directly without an LED driver would mean that the fixture itself would have to be at that right voltage. And the only way to dim it would be with pulse width modulation, for instance. And that would be it's possible and definitely doable. The thing is that most fixtures are not built to be at that very specific voltage. And, so the likelihood of actually having many fixture options, you would not have very many fixture options in that scenario. And then, you would also, I'm just trying to think. I think that would be your biggest issue, is that just the number of fixture options. And we're trying to be as versatile as possible. If we were a fixture company and we wanted to create a line of fixtures that are very specific to PoE, then that could be an option. But for us, that doesn't make sense. We're trying to be as hardware agnostic and enable a wide ecosystem of product.
Great. Just a reminder to our participants, just submit your questions in Q&A. This will be recorded from start to end if you missed any bits of it. And you can also upvote questions. So if there's any questions that you see someone else asking, just give it that thumbs up. It helps me prioritize what the audience really wants to hear as well. So feel free to do that. One that I think is very interesting is asked by Hanson Schultz. He asked, are there any blue light LED manufacturers that you've worked with? For example, Vitovios, Illumi. And so looking those up, those are those LED lighting companies that provide antimicrobial LED lights for home and public. So have we worked with them? And if not, what might our plan be to work with them?
Yeah, so we have worked with a couple of those companies for antimicrobial applications. But there's actually a new solution that we've developed that we just patented, actually, that is really exciting, that will help with this new epidemic. And so we're going to be, I don't want to steal thunder from Kim and her efforts, because we'll be doing a marketing announcement on that here in the next few weeks. So I probably should hold off on saying much more, right?
It's fine. We've been, just based on my work with the product team, the idea of using antimicrobial LED lighting for sanitizing spaces has been something on our radar for a while, in part because hospitals have always had issues with MRSA. So with the current crisis, we are accelerating. We're going to have some interesting announcements in the next month or two. So do look for that. We might even launch another webinar focused solely on that topic and how that can affect the market today. So.
Yeah. I'll just say that there are some major opportunities to help in this whole effort. That the nice thing about Igor is that we're able to take different devices and rapidly bring them together and create a solution that delivers true business value. And we can do that very, very rapidly. So we're doing some exciting things, not only from the sanitization effect and being able to take a space and use UVC light and which is very dangerous. So that's where the automation side of what we do comes in and protects that. So.
Yeah, and we're going to probably dedicate a whole webinar to actually explaining that. So we'll be on the list to get that notification.
All right.
The interesting, kind of continuing on, so it's this theme of what else can PoE do? The myth is just lighting. And you expanded a little bit earlier, Dwight, but the one question that's really popular right now is this idea of, have we expanded the PoE system beyond lighting to try and include motorized shades, which you hadn't mentioned in your example? Do you want to talk about motorized shading? Yeah,
motorized shades, we can also power and control. We have a number of examples of that. Legrand, Somfy, and with those products, it's pretty simple. So we're able to just send it a signal and power those devices as well as control them. But now they show up as just another device within our platform that you can create what we call action sets. So let's say if you have an action set for going into presentation mode, it can pull down the shades, it can turn on the lights, turn on the lights in the front to off, the lights in the back on to certain levels, change the temperature of the room. There's a number of things that we can tie into and control and create that full experience.
And kind of continuing with this theme here, someone was asking clarification about your door lock example. So the example of the door lock and a light powered from the same node, can they be addressed and programmed independent of each other?
Yeah, so everything that is connected to the node is individually addressed, and they show up as separate devices. So even if you have a sensor that has CO2 sensing and humidity and temperature and motion, all those values would come through, but you would see them individually as individual devices in our system, so that you can do completely independent things. You're completely discoupled from the hardware, and you're not restricted to how the hardware is configured as to how you interact with it in the software.
Two of the other top questions relate to pricing and cost competitiveness that you discussed a little earlier. Andrew's just wondering if we have a comparison between PoE and traditional, and really that question about total cost of ownership. So is there any comparison that we have? And if, maybe you just want to speak to that as well. And then in that pricing competitiveness area, George is specifically asking, does this mean a typical Igor node will have more or less the same cost as its equivalent LED power supply?
Great questions. Yeah. So on the economic side, there's a couple different ways in which things are implemented. So you either have new construction, you have deep retrofit, where let's say it's on that tenant space out most everything and putting a new tenant in. They have light retrofit. On the new construction and deep retrofit, it's a no-brainer. It'll cost less a lot of times. It would be hard to find a way to make it cost more, in my opinion. And we can we're doing more and more studies on this, but that number can vary depending on jurisdiction. And so for instance, New York, it still most of the time would cost less, but electricians and other labor class are doing certain parts of the install, whereas in other markets, it can be low voltage installers doing the majority of the work and so forth. So depending on labor classes and things like that, there will be different effects on the economics. On the light retrofit, that one is a little more fuzzy. We've done lots of light retrofits, and the reason for that is because they're interested in more than just lighting. If you're just doing lighting as a retrofit and that's it, more than likely it wouldn't be as cost effective. But if you're also looking to put in a Bluetooth asset tracking system and because now you can put Bluetooth tags on people in senior centers and be able to know their behaviors and know, are they behaviors, are they degrading in health, are they automatically unlock doors, things like that. A lot of stuff you can do that's pretty amazing. Then that's now creating a business value and digital transformation of that specific business, such that it's definitely worth the cost and differentiating that business from its peers. But if it's just lighting, light retrofit probably doesn't make as much sense. What was the second question, Kim?
Does this mean, so in pricing competitiveness, PoE, when you say PoE is not necessarily more expensive than a traditional system, does this mean a typical Igor node will have more or less the same cost as its equivalent LED power supply?
Yeah, so that usually the Igor node would cost, it depends on the power supply you're comparing it to. So if it's a power supply that's a wireless power supply with its own sensor connected and so forth, our Igor node would cost about the same as that. And then you'd also have, on the Igor side of things, you typically have a sensor that would be shared, a sensor that would be maybe one sensor per room versus a sensor for every single light fixture that you may see with wireless installs. So looking at it from the full picture, it could be as a comparable cost to, let's say, a wireless deployment in that regard. When it look at it as a dumb LED driver with no intelligence whatsoever, ours would be more expensive.
Okay. Let's see, what considerations will we have regarding balancing loads? For example, will there be different light output dimming performance if we have different lengths of strips on different drivers? The dimming loads, the loads would be different if it's different lengths and the modules that have different ratings. And our dimming capabilities, anywhere from, we do deep dimming, so 0.1% is as low as we go, and then we can do increments of 0.1% throughout the whole range. So you get an amazing smooth experience blending different lights we also do circadian rhythm lighting, which requires dual LED channel output or more to a fixture, and blending not only the dimming of the fixture, but also the blending between, if it's 3000 Kelvin to 7000 Kelvin and throughout the day, and making it feel very seamless and making it so people just don't even notice, right? And then adding some of these other LED channels to fixtures that can be for sanitization and so forth. That also is really shows off the power of how we have so many channels in our fixture. Or up and down lights. There's lots of things you can do. All right. I'm going to combine a couple questions here. Who would design a complete lighting and control system? And as you've talked, it might be more than lighting as well. For example, is it an electrical engineering firm with Igor's assistance, or who would design it? And then who would install it? Yeah,
that's a great question. So we offer a full end-to-end support services, all the way from design assistance through to post-install. But there's a lot of stuff in between, the wiring, the project management, the pre-wiring certification, the commissioning, all these different things where we've spent a lot of time building out our services group and processes around that are well defined, and that has really separated us out from everyone else. That it's depending on the project, people will leverage more or less of each one of those services. So if the project already has someone that has well-versed, and we have what we call Igor University, and we have on-site training and so forth. So we have multiple training programs that can get your design and specifiers up to speed as to how to best utilize Igor. So in that case, we're doing more of a design assist, and it can be, if it's been someone that's done a lot of work with us, that can be fairly minimal. Other times we're doing pretty much everything because there's just no one that is in place to do it. So once again, on the commissioning side, on the install side, all those different things, it's the same story. On the install side, we have either electricians doing it, we'll have resellers that are installers as well, that they have their own low voltage groups. It could be an electrical contractor that has both low voltage and high voltage groups, and they're looking for new opportunities to, reduce their own internal costs. There's so many different combinations, but for us, we're flexible. We are, we'll accommodate the project owner, and the building owner, so that we can do it in the way that they most want to proceed on that building.
Okay, so one of the top questions right now is from Nick Ware. Is there a surge protection on the node in case of exceeding power ratings of the node?
Yeah, so there is surge protection on it as part of the UL rating. However, that the actual power over Ethernet architecture in general actually protects a lot of that to begin with, because it's connected to the power over Ethernet switch. That's the only thing it's connected to, unlike typical electrical devices where you're going to connect ground literally to a nearby piece of metal that's part of the structure. These devices are completely isolated. They have no path to ground, to like common ground, which is typical in a building. So by doing that, the only thing they're really susceptible to is power surges within the power over Ethernet switch, which people will protect those power over Ethernet switches because they're valuable IT equipment. So they're going to put surge suppression on those power over Ethernet switches. The power over Ethernet switches themselves have electrical isolation that protects the end devices. So we do have to go through that surge protection on our rating, but however, it's rarely ever going to be utilized because all the power that we get is being protected.
Great. Question as well, are there any plans for a 90 watt Rev 5 style node? So I think that was a form factor question.
Yeah. So that is, I'm asked that every single day, I think, multiple times a day. So that is coming. And that will be an exciting addition to our product family for sure. So we've got, right. That's one of those other areas where I'm not ready to talk too much about it, but we've got some really exciting ways in which we're approaching that.
Okay. So we've got a question here from James. Where is the scene brain? Where's the software that tells the fixture to turn on and off when a certain switch is pressed, if the internet goes down, and is command and control for basic scenes? Sorry, it just moved. So do you want to talk about that a little bit? The software, where does it live? What happens if the internet goes down?
Yeah, so it resides on a local server, and that local server receives any, what I like to think about as stimulus, kind of like your own body, right? You have your nerves and touch and feel and sense, smell and everything else. Those all go back to your brain. And same concept here. Someone presses a wall control, motion sensor goes off, daylight sensor, anywhere in your building, those sensory mechanisms then send back to the server. The server abstracts out whether it's, it could be a DALI communication, a DMX, it could be, all sorts of Bluetooth data coming in. There's all sorts of different ways that we could be connecting. There's already devices that are already IP devices that are on the network that may not even be connected to the node. So our software is able to aggregate and act as almost like a Tower of Babel or a Rosetta Stone of normalizing all these communications. And then we'll make the decisions internally as to what it wants to do. And then it sends out commands to lights and, shade controls and motors and all sorts of different things. And the benefit of that is, once again, it can act as, normalizing no matter what kind of device it is, it normalizes all that. And there can be competing priorities as well. And so that software helps act as a traffic cop on those priorities as well. But a lot of times, and what's been done to date is more peer-to-peer. And when you have peer-to-peer, those two things have to behave exactly the same. They have to talk the exact same language, and you really get locked into a proprietary system. And then there's very little manageability and control. And if things wanted to compete with each other, it's hard to logistically sort that out. So our platform really helps unify all of these parts and pieces in the building and provide manageability and operational control.
Great. Let's see, this is from, I believe, AJ or Ajay. Please share your work on NPS to help with occupant count and position to help in the current COVID scenario. So what are we doing with that NPS technology for occupant counting and positioning?
Yeah, so we've got, I'm not ready to talk about everything we're doing there, but
part of the launch, but
yeah. So maybe stay tuned.
Partners,
we'll be
right?
talking about that in a couple weeks. But by using net presence detection and occupants location systems, that is a big deal. We do have something that I have working on, and we'll be announcing it here.
Yeah. Okay, so from Gareth again, how does the node dim an LED source? PWM?
So the dimming, how does it work? It is through a variety of different mechanisms. We can dim through PWM. We can dim through constant current and just managing that curve. The new constant voltage node actually will have the ability to dim by changing the voltage itself. So there's a number of different ways that we can dim. We can actually do hybrid dimming as well. On the low end range, your eyes are very susceptible to slight changes. And so we can do constant current dimming, but at the very low level, we switch to stay at a certain current level, but we switch into PW mode and just dim it via that PWM. So there's some things that we can do that is very advanced, and we can do different dimming curves as well. We can do the traditional dolly curve, logarithmic, linear curves, but we give you a lot of options. And through our API, you can dim it one way one time and dim it another way with a different curve the next time. So it gives you a lot of power. You're not locked in. The software, it bubbles up all of those abilities so that you have more and more control.
All right, got a couple more here, and then I'll have Dwight flip at the end to our very last slide, which has some information on the next upcoming webinar series. But let's see. So can a node control AC powered loads for a mixed project?
Yeah, absolutely. That is a very common question. We have all sorts of different diagrams that, anyone who's interested in that, just contact us and we can provide, and we'll be publishing those. I don't know if those are even on our website right now, but we should get those up there. But there's all kinds of different combinations of, you have 0 to 10 volt drivers that are dim to off. You have 0 to 10 volt drivers that don't dim to off, so you need a relay. You have emergency versions of each one of those. You have Dolly controlled devices. And I think there's phase dimming that we also can control. So there's about 10 or 12 different combinations and configurations of AC line voltage drivers that we can control, and via having a node that communicates to those drivers. And we have line diagrams to illustrate each one of those scenarios. So just contact us and we can get you more information on that.
Great. Let's just knock a couple more out. So what's the current source capacity of each PoE port?
Sorry, what was the question?
What is the current sourcing capacity of each PoE port?
sourcing capacity. So I'm not really understanding that question.
I'm not sure either. I think maybe this is that 60 to 90 watt discussion. Troop D, if you wanted to message us to clarify that, feel free to do that. All right, and Dwight, I'll take over this. I'll bring up the last slide there. Don't worry about that. All right, so a couple final quick questions. Does the node need to be in the box, or can it be used as it is, such as exposed? I believe this is the difference between embedded versus remote node discussion from Fred.
Yeah, so if the node is inside the fixture, then typically you would just leave it alone and you would just connect up to it. If the node is outside of the fixture, and then we have a whole process of field commissioning, and you can set at the field, at the factory, at a staging area before it gets to the field. You can configure that node to be whatever you want it to do. You can pre-wire, a lot of times we'll pre-wire little wire whips that have certain connectors that are ready to plug and play with certain sensors and other things. You can get all of that ready as much as possible, is always a good idea, before it is sent to the field, so that at the field itself, it's a very quick, fast process. And it can be proven out and vetted before it gets to the field. But we support all those scenarios. And, if, for instance, you do want to make a change at the field, we have the tools to do that too. And, but yeah, it can, I don't know if I answered that question the way that it was intended, but we can be very flexible with how you implement these things.
Well, we've got a lot of questions, so we might take a little time after this to go through and see if we can release a written Q&A answer as well. Lots of questions. Thank you everyone for your engagement today. I'm presuming you can see my slide now, just the thank you for joining us. Keep in mind, this is the first out of 6 in our webinar series. So if you want to learn more generally about PoE, but specifically a little bit more about Igor as well, next week, David Kane, who's our in-house lighting designer, he's going to talk just some lighting design 101, very basic intro, but might be a great way of understanding how this technology works a little bit more and how you can use it in your space. We've got all of them up on our events calendar with the website there, and then our YouTube page is where the webinars will live after we're done with the recordings. So I just want to thank you. Thanks, Dwight, for your time. Thank you, everyone who attended, for your questions and your participation. Sorry we couldn't get to everything, but there was just so much good stuff in here. And I think, certainly we might do another Q&A in the future just with Dwight, so you can really challenge him, make sure he knows his stuff. And in the meantime, I think that'll be it for today. So again, thank you so much, Dwight.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you everyone for joining.